On this episode, we're talking with our friend Paul Baldwin, author, pastor, and coach, as he walks us through the recent release of his book, Devout In Doubt. Stay with us.
You're listening to the Dudes and Dads Podcast, a show dedicated to helping men be better dudes and dads by building community through meaningful conversation and storytelling. And now, here are your hosts, Joel DeMott and Andy Lehman.
Joel D.
Andy.
Wow.
Andy, if you haven't noticed, I've recently come back from the Magnum PI fan club meeting.
I see that. You're very floral in your attire today.
Detroit cap and all. Thank you, Tom Selleck.
Wow.
Yikes.
I could almost picture you as Tom Selleck. Almost.
Uh-huh. Mm-hmm. Maybe. Yeah. So here we are back again, Andy, for another great episode. This time, we're going to dive into it in just a second. So great to have our guest that we've got with us coming to us from a
remote location.
A remote location.
Oh,
an
undisclosed. Undisclosed remote location.
Undisclosed remote location. But before we get into the interview, Andy, we do definitely want to say thanks to a few people. Don't we?
Yeah, we do. So we want to thank our Patreons. We could not do this show without you guys. You keep the lights on. You keep the internet streaming. You keep everything going on this show. We appreciate you. If you want to become a Patreon, you can do that too by going to patreon.com/Dudes and Dads Podcast, patreon.com/Dudes and Dads Podcast, where you can join our other fine people, supporters, that they get extra monthly things. They get releases early. They get bonus episodes. They get ad-free episodes. They are just...
Yeah, we really pull out all the stops. We really do. And friends, we are quickly approaching 25,000 official downloads here, and we're so grateful for each and every one of those. And each one of those downloads is made possible, and paceable, by our good Patreon friends. So thanks everybody for signing up. If you haven't done so already, please get on the Dudes and Dads.
You got to clear out your mouth today.
Oh my gosh, it's a little bit of a struggle. Get on that Dudes and Dads podcast bandwagon. Would love to have you. Well, hey, as we said at the outset, we have a guest on tonight, our good friend, my friend who, quite honestly, I've not seen him in real time for quite some time, but someone who's made a significant impact on my life and the lives of many others, our friend Paul Baldwin. Paul is the recent author of Devout In Doubt, diving into deeper devotion. This book comes out of a really amazing sequence of events, diagnoses, all of that Paul and his family journeyed through. So he's going to tell us all about that. So without further ado, Paul Baldwin, you are on the Dudes and Dads podcast. Welcome. Paul, thanks for being on with us, man. Appreciate you being here.
Very excited to be here, and thank you for dialing up. What I was trying to decide what does Joel look like right now. He looks strikingly familiar.
Yep.
And I didn't even. Yeah, that was it.
It's like a ginger. I'm like a ginger Tom Selleck. That's
oh yeah.
That's exactly it.
Yeah. So Paul, you've got yourself a family, and you got yourself a job, and you've got yourself some things you've done in the past and things you're doing now. And so, as we always like to hear about your dad's stats, tell us about life, tell us about the family, where you come from, what you're doing, all that good stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I was born and raised in Southern California. Met my wife just out of high school. We've been married 29 years. Spent about 13, 14 years in the Midwest. That's where I met you, Joel.
Yes, and Paul was much more depressed in those days because things, when you're living in northern Indiana, life is hard. But anyway, go on. Sorry.
It was an awesome season. But winters were pretty brutal because we moved there down to Miami, Florida, where their winters are all of 2 days at about 45 degrees. And so,
so harsh. So harsh.
Yeah,
that's hard to do.
It's pretty awesome. And so we've been down there the last 8 years. So my wife and I have been married 29 years. We have 4 children. We have a 28-year-old daughter. She's married. And she has our first granddaughter, who is now
awesome.
4, I think. Yeah, it's pretty fantastic. And then we have a son who's 26 years old, and he's dating a really lovely girl. We love her a lot. And then we've got our daughter, Hannah, who's 24. She's married. She lives in Southern Florida. And then our other daughter, Abby, who's 21 years old. And she's actually on her way back from Uganda, serving at Youth with a Mission right now. So they're all adults right now, and we love every one of them. Blast with them.
Paul, you're in this empty nest season, and we talked about this a little bit before the show. How great is it? Because Andy and I we love our kids. We love hanging out and doing all the things we're doing now.
Although Joel yesterday, my son Micah was like, hey, at the end of the next year, I'll be 18. And he's actually 16 now, but that is, true. At the end of next year.
He hit you with that truth bomb.
Yeah, and it was not okay.
So Paul, as we anticipate these days in the future, what's it like for you right now? How are you loving it? Is it just everything that we dreamed it can be?
Yeah, it's everything that you're dreaming about. I'm living it right now. You were doing the math. We've been married 29 years, and our daughter's 28. So she's been with us since day one. And so we didn't have that 3, 4, 5 years before we had kids. We were right on top of it right away. And it was fantastic. My wife couldn't keep her hands off me, that kind of thing.
That's what I like to hear. That's what I like to hear. Mm-hmm. We know where the blame lies.
That's right. That's right. And so just in the last couple of years, we've really experienced just the two of us by ourselves in our home, which has been really, really weird. Like cooking meals. It has always been for the 4 kids and oftentimes their friends. And then, and so it's just the two of us, and we can just pick up and take off anytime we want to. And it's pretty fantastic. We love spending time with our kids. Our kids, it's a blast. Movie nights, hanging out, all of that. But having our own time is pretty awesome too. So
before I ask my next question, Paul, the other thing is that Andy and I constantly talk about how we're raising our kids to be the kind of adults we want to hang out with when they get older. Is that a worthwhile goal? Because I think that we're on the right track, but it sounds to me like that's the kind of life that you're trying to live these days.
Yeah, and what's funny is I think sometimes you do it intentionally and sometimes you don't do it intentionally. Either way, you're discipling your kids, right? Either way, you're shaping your kids, whether you're being intentional or not. So there's a lot of pressure there. But we have begun to notice as our kids are kind of soaring through their 20s that they are starting to look a lot like us, for better and for worse.
Sure.
You know what I mean? I mean, we got one of our kids that has the best of us and the worst of us, and we're like, oh my God, we're so sorry. But it is also pretty fun to see some values that are coming through, personalities that are coming through, and some little quirky things that are coming through that are real cute. And I'll say, oh, that's totally you. She'll say, oh, it's totally me. And so it's happening. And again, it's happening whether you're intentional about it or not. So you might as well be intentional. There's a little life lesson there. But we are definitely noticing that in their 20s for sure. Like when they're 18, 19, 20, they don't want to be us and they don't want to admit that they're us. But now that they're getting in, they're getting married and they're getting into their mid-20s and the personality's kind of settling in, you're starting to see it a lot more, and it's pretty fun. It's pretty fun and scary, to be just straight up honest. It's pretty fun and scary. Yeah.
So, Paul, what does work look like for you these days? What are you doing for a job? What kind of mess have you gotten yourself into down there in the great state of Florida?
Yeah, well, I was in youth ministry since 2002 all the way through for a long, long time, and even before then. So almost since I was 19 years old. I'm 51 now, so from 19 to probably 44, I was in youth ministry. And then I took a job down in Miami, Florida, the Miami Vineyard Community Church, as the executive pastor. We've got we're in the southwest side of Miami. There's about 4,000 people in the church, about 40 staff, about 400 volunteers, and so I oversee all of the staff family, the finance and facilities, and all their leadership development, all their strategic planning. So I do that. That's my full-time gig, and I've been doing that for 8 years. And then I've also just kind of on-ramped into working with an organization out of Cincinnati Vineyard called the Elemental Group, doing some consulting with churches and nonprofits and some private colleges as well. So I'm doing that on the side. So I'm traveling a lot right now. I actually live in two different cities. I live in Charleston, where my wife and I live, and most of our family. And then I travel down to Miami every other week to run the church down there. And then while I'm up here, I work remotely. So it's a busy life. It's a busy life.
Wow. Yeah. Well, and Paul, so the other thing is, I mean, you're doing as an executive pastor right now. We were joking before the show that, people always ask me, because I'm an executive pastor now too, and the people are like, what does an executive pastor do? And I try to explain it as simply as possible. I just want, for those listening, I don't know many. There's many pastors that have different job descriptions. It can vary, but Paul has figured out how to live and work in both Charleston and Miami. That's just not the norm. That's just not the norm. So I just want to set the record straight. This is not the standard for the job. But as Paul, you said, man, you're in a season right now, and able obviously to do that just because of where you are in life. And man, I think I'm sure you are benefiting so many people in the midst of all of that as you're doing good work, because you make a big impact. So, as far as your background, your educational background is concerned, because you kind of been dipping in all over the place. You got a lot of things that have been involved with or are looking forward to in the future. So what kind of career course did you start off with, and all the college stuff and all that?
Yeah, so I grew up in a construction family, and my father was a drywall contractor. My father-in-law is a painting contractor, so I did most of my work with them. My extended family runs a cement union in California. So I grew up all construction, and I started going to the University of California, and I got a job in their maintenance and ended up becoming the director of operations. And so it was all building, it was all construction, it was all anything having to do with building things. While at the same time, I was a volunteer youth worker in our church from age 19 all the way through till probably about 30 years old. And just really had a passion for youth ministry. I still do have a passion for youth ministry. And so, during those 10 years, I got involved with, a network of youth ministries around the country, and got an invitation to come into youth ministry full time in South Bend, Indiana over there. So my educational background, I'm a sociology major with a concentration in organizational management. And then I've got a master's in counseling. And I only got that because I was working at the university, and they said, hey, we'll pay for your master's degree. And
Done.
What will I do? And so I'm like, well, I like to talk to people, and I was interested in youth ministry, and so I got a master's degree in counseling. So they paid for that, which was pretty cool. And then once I got into ministry, I ended up going through the Vineyard USA has a kind of an educational arm called the Vineyard Leadership Institute. I went through that as a leadership development, just to get some of my theology training, because I really didn't have that in a secular school. And so that's really my educational background.
Yeah.
And just like a lot of us, trying to be a leader that learns. And I read everything I can, and I watch everything that I can, and I love to read. So just trying to teach myself that way as well.
Well, and I'm sure you're like so many of us that, you have all the formal education stuff, and then you go into the ministry world that is its own unique education unto itself. Specifically when you're working with young people, because it was all I could do in my 17 years of youth ministry to try to keep up with what in the world was going on with young people. So now I've just hired other people to try to keep up, I guess. But
and we're in a it's not really a denomination, but an association. We're in one that doesn't, we'll if you've got the experience and the desire, we'll hire you and we'll train you up, because honestly, I don't know that I'm using anything that I learned in my formal education with youth ministry. There's you learn how to follow through, and you learn processes, and I guess my counseling has been really helpful as well. But it's a lot of this is just what do they call it? The seminary of hard knocks.
Yeah,
right? You So, which is kind of like parenting. But yeah.
So now you were diagnosed with something. Can you let's talk about that? What were you diagnosed with, and tell us a little bit about how you were diagnosed?
Yeah, I was diagnosed with a non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. It was pretty radical. It was pretty advanced. We were at stage 4 cancer, and I can tell you the whole story pretty quickly.
Yes, sure.
We were. I'm losing. You know, they say during the COVID season, you lose track of time. You lose sense of your timing.
Yeah.
It was March of 2020 when everything shut down, and most churches in America, you know, they shut down and tried to go online and do the whole thing. It was about that time that I was struggling with some health stuff. We were trying to figure out some root cause, just some immune deficiencies and all that. But on July 12th of 2020, so just a few months later, we were getting ready to go back into the office at the church. Up until then, we were completely remote. My wife and I were working in the backyard, putting in a back patio, and just working hard. It was a hot day, July in Miami. It was humidity of like 2,000%, super hot. Super hot. And we were working hard, and I remember taking a bunch of breaks, and my wife was kind of, you know, she's a workhorse. She was working hard, and I think she was calling me a wuss and like making fun of me and all this stuff. But I kept taking breaks. And that night after we had dinner, I laid in bed and I was just in terrible, terrible pain. I could not figure out what was it. And I'm like the last one to go to the emergency room, but it was so much pain. And on July 12th, I went to the emergency room. I said, "Hey, you got to take me to the emergency room." And she dropped me off. It must have been like 11 o'clock at night. And she had to drop me off. And she couldn't come in with me, which was kind of weird because of COVID, right?
Yeah.
All the hospitals were locked down. If you look at all the nasty COVID numbers in Florida, it's pretty much Miami. We've got 5 million people in that city, and nobody was taking any precautions. COVID was going nuts in that town. And so they dropped me off. They immediately did some tests. They said, "You're not leaving the hospital. We think we see something, and we don't like what it is, and we think it might be cancer." Which was just blowing my mind. I had to call my wife on the phone.
Man.
Oh my goodness.
And which just absolutely sucked because, you know, I mean, this is a woman I've been with for, 28 years at that time. And I had to tell her over the phone. But I had to wait in the hospital for the entire week because what they were looking for took a bit of time to really diagnose when they go back to pathology and all that. So on July 17th, which was actually my birthday, my 49th birthday, I'm in the hospital. I get a little piece of paper that says non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. So on my birthday, I'm told, "Happy birthday, you've got non-Hodgkin's lymphoma." Yeah. And doctor sat with me, a whole team came in, and they said, "This is pretty advanced. Like, this is pretty aggressive." And I was just tripping, man, because we don't have any history of that at all. I'm a runner. I eat fairly healthy at this season in my life, take really good care of myself. We don't really have a family history that we knew of at the time. We've since learned that there was a little bit of history there. And so that was on July 17th, and July 18th, they immediately started a pretty gnarly and aggressive treatment of chemotherapy that was going to take me about 6 months to go through it. And a lot of that was in the hospital. So. So that was the diagnosis. It was pretty hard, and the treatment was even more aggressive. So okay, you get the diagnosis. The bomb is dropped on you, and I think of so many people. That moment where life just shifts incredibly fast, all in kind of one intense moment. What goes through your mind initially? Like when you're hit with that info, what hits you the hardest? Yeah, I mean, a little bit of disbelief, right? There's this kind of surrealness of like, no, this is not, no, right?
Sure.
And then there's this stage of grief, but you go through a little bit of fear. A lot of fear, because when you hear cancer, right, you immediately think, that's it, I'm going to die. I mean, that might be an over-exaggeration, but in your mind, you're going, does this mean I'm going to die? Like you said, it was aggressive. What does this mean? And then it leads to, frustration, and then you kind of jump into confusion again. And like, how did this happen? I don't get it. So and you start to think through these things. Doubt. Of course, I wrote the book on doubt. If I'm really honest, like, God, how could you allow this to happen? Which is kind of arrogant. And I can talk a little bit about that a little bit later if you want to. So just a lot of like a cocktail of emotions, bouncing back from fear to frustration to confusion to doubt to, hey, can you explain this again? Like, I had the doctors come in probably 5 or 6 times and explain it to me for a couple of reasons. Number one, I just wanted to understand. But number two, I'm not a detail guy. And I'm trying to translate exactly what they're saying to my wife, who is a detailed person. And so my wife is like, we're the kind of couple where, my wife will say, hey, what'd you guys talk about? I don't really remember. I mean, we talked for like 2 or 3 hours, but I have no idea what we talked about because I'm just not that detailed person. And so it was a real intense season of just a lot of emotions, like up and down. I'm a pretty emotional guy anyways, but I don't know if that made sense. So a lot of fear, a lot of frustration, a lot of confusion, and then a little bit of doubt of just, I don't get this,
Yeah. So in the book you mentioned, and you kind of said at the outset here, like that you're in quarantine, so you're by yourself processing all of this stuff. And then it's like processing on your own and then trying to communicate with the family, like what's going on and playing that whole game. I do wonder, like, how did isolation, like the idea of isolation around this kind of thing, when you're trying to handle this to a degree on your own, because you don't have people right there next to you. I just kind of wonder, like, what that experience is like. Because I know you would be in this camp, I would be in this camp, Andy, this camp where we say like, man, community in these times is essential, and this is what we would like want to both surround ourselves with and push other people toward in this kind of scenario. And yet here you are, held up in all places, which just, I've been with my kid in a ICU for a few days, and that about drove me nuts. So I can only imagine what that was like for you. What's the experience like if you're kind of doing this on your own to a certain extent?
Yeah, a few levels, because not only was I quarantined from my family, but I was actually quarantined from the nurses as well. So it was such an intense time in Miami with COVID that the nurses were only allowed to come in at scheduled times. And so I was actually in a quarantined room in the hospital. Not all the hospital rooms were like that, but because they didn't know the extent of my cancer, they were super careful about who could even come in from the staff. So there's that. I've discovered over the last couple of years that I'm probably more of an introvert than an extrovert, but also an external processor. Like I have to process out loud. And so if you were like a fly on the wall, you would see me actually talking out loud and trying to process. And it must have looked like I was in a crazy hospital. And then there were a lot of conversations that I had with my wife. But yeah, it was on some levels, it was helpful that I was by myself, because when something goes sideways in my life, I tend to retract and I tend to get really quiet. And I don't need a lot of people. I just need my wife. I need my kids, and we like to huddle and we like to hide and just get away, and we'll deal with our stuff privately. But at the same time, I've got 4,000 people in our congregation, and something big just happened, and we have to figure out a way to communicate this to the church, because if you don't control the narrative of that as in a public position like this, people will control that narrative, and that can be a really crazy thing, because as you guys know, human beings can start to tell themselves stories that are not necessarily true. So there was the managing my own emotion. There was the managing my family's emotion, which my wife just took. She just took and handled that. And then there was managing the emotions of the staff and then the overall congregation. And all of that had to be done as I was quarantined. And way better like this, you and I over a screen or over a table, than trying to do something over a phone. And so it was a bit of a trick, and it was frustrating, but at the same time, I needed that time to just process. And I had to be careful how much I processed out loud, because my wife's a very literal person. So if I say too much of what's on the mind, that's going to trip her out too. But at the same time, our wives want to know. Our wives
Sure,
want to know
absolutely.
what's going on in our heads, right?
Yeah.
So we think, I mean, again, dudes and dads, as dudes and dads, we think that we're protecting our wives, we're protecting our children by not sharing all of the information, but being fully transparent. But when, in fact, quite the opposite is necessary for intimacy and community within our family. But it's different levels, I don't know if any of that made sense, but it was
absolutely
the real emotional gymnastics,
So you're in the hospital room and you start journaling. You start writing some things down. Which became the book? I mean, was it basically, it's almost not exactly a one-to-one transfer, but like were those journals and those writings and those things like that, when you started that, as you're writing in that room, did you have an idea that this would become something else, or was it like just a way of your, like, kind of a self-count? Like, what was the purpose behind what you were doing in that during that season?
Yeah, I mean, part of it is journaling for me. I remember growing up, Chuck Swindoll used to say, when you journal as you're doing your devotions, you read a verse, you kind of just, God, what does this mean to me? You're trying to, when you journal, when you attach language to your thoughts, it helps you process. It helps you study God's word more deeply. It helps you, for some people, it's a great way for me to communicate with God as I write. That was not the intent. I mean, that's part of what I do, but really the main motivation for journaling was our communications director at our church. We were trying to figure out how to, we're trying to create a installation between the church and our family immediately, because we knew that we were just going to get inundated with text and voicemails and people who want to visit. And we didn't want any of that. And we love our church family, but we just needed to be separate from them, and we needed to handle our business, because when things like this happen, we tend to hide. We deal with our stuff. We're a very private family, but we also knew that my position was a very public position, and so we had to do something to communicate to the church that what was going on from day to day. So our communications director set up the Caring Bridge site. If you're familiar with the Caring Bridge site. Yeah. It's a really helpful tool, and so I just started to let people know from day to day how I was doing, and that turned into kind of my devotion time, my processing to those people that were listening and supporting, and that number rose to about 10,000 people or something like that. It was just ridiculous.
Wow.
And we had no idea. I mean, some of these people were around the world, and we had no idea who they were, but they were a friend of a family member who's a friend, that sort of thing. And so I just kept writing to communicate to them. So what was a tool to kind of protect our family from the rest of, the mob, turned into just a real therapeutic and spiritually formative time for me, and then eventually for other people. And about 3/4 of the way through chemotherapy, somebody said, "Hey, this is some good writing. What would you think about turning this into a book?" And 3 or 4 people said that. And so I called a buddy of mine, PJ Ashenfelder, who works up at Notre Dame. And I said, "Hey, what do you think about this? Is there any legitimacy to that?" He goes, "I don't know. Let's try it." So then I called Terry Linhart, who I think you guys know.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah, he's at Bethel College, and he's a 20-year friend of mine. And I just said, "Hey, can I just send you a couple of articles or entries, and what do you think?" He goes, "I think this is really raw and really transparent. I think this might connect to some people." So he connected me to a publisher that he knew, and I submitted what I had. It was just raw journal entries. And by the end of the week, their whole editorial board came back and said, "We really like this. We've not seen this kind of writing. It's super raw." And it's super raw. I mean, I'm like, guys, there's a couple of chapters where I'm pissed off at God. And
Right.
Yeah.
And I say so, and there's some entries where I'm just like, "Yeah, I don't want to talk at all today," And they really liked it. And so they said, "Can you put some form and fashion to it and give us, I had some small group questions. We added some quotes and some reflective prayers and all that. And it turned into the book, and we picked up some really neat endorsements from around the country, and we just decided, we really believe the Lord's just saying, don't take a dollar from this book, and give it all away. We're giving it all away to the American Cancer Society. So it makes it a lot. I'm not a big self promoter, so it's I can promote the project though.
Sure.
I can totally promote the project. Yep. And so I hope we sell 1 million copies, man, and give as much money to raising money and awareness for people trying to figure out cancer. 600. Check this out: 600,000 new cancer cases a year.
Wow.
Just in this country alone. It's a real pandemic. And so, that's how it all kind of happened. And it really came from an act of obedience, because I didn't want to do that. I really didn't want to share my stuff. Nobody really likes to be vulnerable. Nobody really likes to admit when they're weak. Nobody really wants to put their bald head and bald eyebrows on the screen. I felt like that was the act of obedience. And so, God's faithful. And
Absolutely.
it all came about. So that was a real long answer to your question.
No, it's great.
It's great. So the book is called Devout In Doubt. And what can someone expect if they get a copy of this book? What's the format? What's it look like to pick it up? Is it a straight through read? Is it something you do day to day? How does that look? Yeah,
it's set up as a day to day. There's 49 entries. And again, it wasn't 49 days of treatment. It was 49 days where I was strong enough emotionally and physically to write something. There's another 160 days where I was either too miserable or just not in it. And so I try to be really honest about this is a snapshot of my journey, but it's set up as a devotional. And so it is a day-to-day deal where you'll hear, and the feedback we're getting is we really felt like we were with you in this journey. And at the end of each entry, there's about a page or two per entry. At the end of each one is a reflection question where I really ask you to do a little deep dive into your own life. And then there's a time where there's a prayer that you can either pray for yourself or to model for it. And then there's a quote that, I love quotes. I love quotes because I think it's people in history, not just religious figures, but, just public figures who are able to attach language to thoughts that we're wrestling with. And the feedback that we're getting right now is that about a quarter of a way through the book, they're with me in this journey, and they're finding themselves in this journey. Because my story is cancer. I never wanted that story to be cancer. That's just, nobody wants to pick that up as their own story. But we put it together in such a way that that hopefully whatever season of suffering that you're in, you'll be able to learn how to meet Jesus in that, and learn how to wrestle with God in that, and learn how to walk out inevitable doubt that you're going to have in life. It's just a reality of our faith, and I'm super stoked that's been happening. I've been getting emails and Facebook messages all over the country of just people that are being spoke to and ministered to by it. So it's pretty cool, pretty humbling.
Yeah. So Paul, I think just apart from my pastoral experience and professional experience and whatever, for those of us that are in, kind of in the big umbrella of the evangelical community, the word doubt is kind of a dangerous word for people. It's kind of uncomfortable. And yet here you've just been really bold and just emblazoned it on the front of your book cover. What do you think the common misunderstanding amongst so many people, but people with faith in particular, what kind of misunderstanding around the idea of doubt do you think do you often find?
Yeah, I think that in short, I think that people think that doubt, if I doubt God at any level, then that's divisive, right? Two different visions is division, right? And so if I doubt, I must not trust that God is doing his job correctly. And so in my doubt, I'm considering other options. And I think that, and honestly, as a pastor for 30 years now, I think that we have, as ministers, almost done our churches a disservice And because we will come on strong and say, you just got to trust in the Lord with all your heart. Lean not on your own understanding. Well, I'm starting to lean on my own understanding as I just get this cancer diagnosis. So does that mean I'm doubting God? Well, maybe there's a little bit of doubt there. Does that mean I'm not trusting God as the Bible says I should? And so I'm not who I was supposed to be? And am I sinning? Am I stumbling here? Absolutely not. I will just 100% say absolutely not. I don't think doubt has to be a divisive thing. It doesn't divide our faith. It's actually a doorway to our faith. I mean, you look at Lamentations, you look at the Psalms. How many times did David question God and complain to God and say, I don't get this. This doesn't make sense. But we see David always kind of just wrestle out loud with God through his doubt, and God's patient. I mean, one of the chapters in the book, one of the journal entries was like, God's not surprised. God's not like, Joel, I can't believe you just did this. We're out, man.
Yeah.
God is a big God. He can handle it, and he's patient with us. He loves us just like we are with our children, right? We love our kids. They say the most asinine things when they, Daddy, are you going to catch me at the pool? Are you sure you're going to catch me? Like, you just caught your kid 7 different times. The 8th time, you're going to drop your kid and let your kid. No, God can handle that. And so just being okay, crying out to God and saying, I don't understand it. I'm confused. I'm afraid. I'm frustrated. Yes, I do have doubt, but lean in to that doubt. Don't lean away from God. Lean into God during that doubt. And so doubt doesn't have to be divisive in your faith. Doubt can actually be a doorway in your faith. I'll tell you right now, I have grown more in my faith over the last 3 years than I probably have in the last 30 years. Mm-hmm. And it's just a remarkable thing. And it's affected everything in my life. I'm a better husband, or I'm a healthier husband. I'm a healthier father. I think I'm a better leader. I think I'm a healthier pastor. Did God cause this or did God allow it? It really doesn't matter. I've gone through it, and we were able to lean into this thing. Yeah. I mean, here's the thing about it. I heard this on as a podcast where somebody's preaching, and I loved it. So I can't really claim this statement for my own. But we were surprised physically. Like, we were absolutely surprised physically, but we were not unprepared spiritually, right? Mm. We were surprised physically, but we were not unprepared spiritually. Now, about 12 years ago, when I was living up in Indiana, I actually got pretty sick. This happened once before. It wasn't cancer, but I got chronic strep pneumonia. It was a real mess, and they weren't sure if I was going to make it. And so we were surprised physically, but we were not prepared spiritually. I was not prepared spiritually. And I would say things in my head, not out loud because I'm a Christian, but in my head I would say, in my mind, I would be like, God, after all I've done for you, you're going to allow this to happen. A real entitlement, really just kind of arrogant posture. But this time around, it was not that at all. It was just kind of like, it was less about, hey, God, what are you doing? But more about, God, okay, what are you doing? Something's happening here, and I don't want to miss a thing that you're doing. And that sounds super spiritual, and that sounds super pious, and just know that it wasn't that clean. But that's what doubt did for me. Doubt took us through this process where we really wanted to understand, if this is happening right now, God, whether you allowed it or whether you caused it, and that's a whole nother podcast, right? God, what do you want us to learn? Who are you shaping me to be? How can I grow through this rather than go through it? How can I grow through it, GROW, rather than go through this? And so I think that doubt can be one of the most beautiful, mystical, healthy, spiritual tools in our lives, but oftentimes we miss it, and we ignore it, and we suppress it, and we say, no, I can't doubt. That's wrong. That's sin. And it's just not. I don't believe that at all.
Do you think for somebody that comes into a situation, I think I'm just trying to think at kind of like the practical level of, there might be a greater danger for the person in terms of their long-term faith journey to initially not embrace and basically say, no, like I'm not going to doubt. I'm not going to doubt. I'm going to stand strong. I'm going to pull myself up by my bootstraps and then try to walk through something hard that way, that the trajectory spiritually for them might be or likely is way more dangerous or it has way less hope in it than the person who kind of comes to the end of themselves and says, I'm going to embrace all the messiness and the doubt, and I'm not going to get freaked out when I start saying crazy things in my head, because that's part of being a human being and that's part of living life. And that the trajectory of that is actually over the long term healthier. Is that a fair a fair thing to say?
I think it is a fair thing, but I also want to recognize that it's human nature for us to want to control things, right?
Yep.
Just it. Again, I'm 51 years old. I've been walking with God since I was 19, and so I recognize also that I've fallen down and I've gotten back up a lot more than someone who's been 26 years old too. So I want to be real about where we're at. I don't expect a 26-year-old who's been walking with Jesus for 3 years, or even one of our kids, to just immediately have this disposition to say, I'm gonna put my hands out like this and just receive and really learn what God's doing in my life. It's our human nature to want to fix and to want to correct and want to say, what can I do differently? I mean, even right now, I'm still kind of like, I'm meeting with a doctor this week. What can I do to prevent cancer again? This is just how we're made. And there are some things that I can do, right? I mean, I can eat healthier, I can drink a lot more water, I can exercise, all these different things. But I think we get so focused on what can I do to make this better? What can I do to get rid of this doubt? And I just think we don't teach enough in the church, and we don't teach enough our children to say, hey, it's okay if you doubt. I mean, Joel, you were in youth ministry. How many times did a parent come to you and say, hey, I think my kid's checking out of their faith?
Oh boy, yeah.
Right?
Nothing is worse. Nothing is worse. Yeah.
And they're freaking out, and they're thinking, I'm a terrible parent. Oh my God, my kid's going to go to hell, and all this different stuff. And I just had to tell them, hey, it's okay. It's okay that they have questions, because questions will lead to answers. So your job is to lead them through those questions and help them find answers. And how many times do we say this, right? This is the doorway to them owning their own faith and graduating from your faith as a mom and a dad, right? Yeah. And so, so we've got to spend more, especially with our children, we got to spend more time not correcting the doubt, but connecting with them with these questions and helping them sort through these questions. And the same is true for adult human beings, right? Mm-hmm. I'm not sure if I answered your question there. It was kind of a long question. I gave kind of a messy answer, so you can tell me.
You're doing all the right things. You're saying all the right things, Paul. That's all the things. Mostly, you've given us at least 3 solid tidbits that we'll be able to cut out of this and use to promote the episode. So really, Andy's thrilled over here. He's just like, yes, this is all the stuff, all the content I need. This is fantastic.
Yeah. Absolutely. We do want to remind everyone, we do have a voicemail number, and that number is 574-213-8702, 574-213-8702. We would love to hear your comments about this episode, or if you're on with us live right now, just go ahead and put your comments right in the comment section of the app that you're using.
We love these live people that are getting on.
We do.
Fantastic. We're like, and again, I always just say, I'm just the pretty face on this podcast, but Andy really is the brains behind the operation, and it's really has set up a fantastic option. Joel rocking the Tigers hat with style. Thank you, Jason. Thank you for appreciating the Detroit Tigers, because no one else does. So, Paul, here's what I wonder, because you mentioned this. At the leadership level, so you can talk about family leadership, and you can talk about kind of your professional church leadership. What has shifted for you following this experience? What things maybe have you changed? Have you started doing something? Have you stopped doing something, or have you rearranged in how you do things in light of this journey?
Yeah. So I'm not sure how to answer this question. My staff said more compassionate, which, of course, the story I'm telling myself was like, what was I told, jerk, before? but the two words they've said is you're a lot more compassionate because, obviously with a big staff, a young staff, probably half our staff is under 35. They say I'm more compassionate and they say I'm more present. And so that's great. That's a compliment. And I appreciate that. From my perspective, I feel leadership is simplified for me. As you know, Joel, as executive pastors, you're in the weeds of everything, and it can be really exhausting and be really tiring. And so, for me, I try to back up and not go so fast. When I'm meeting with a staff member, I'm a little bit more present in the how are you doing and how is your family doing? Because I know that they're not going to be in this role 30 years from now. They might be in a different role. They might be in a different church. I want to know that they're growing. I want to know that they are being present. I want to know that they are chasing after Jesus, really embracing the work of the Holy Spirit in their life. And so I'm much more present to that. We do get about the business. I mean, obviously, in a big church, in a small church, any church, you still got to be about the work of the church. But on that side of things too, I feel that I'm being a bit more pushy, encouraging to equip and to delegate. And this will sound super morbid. I honestly didn't. There were times where I just did not think I was coming back to this job, and so part of my posture was, what if I didn't come back to this job? Who would have taken my position? Am I equipping people? And so I'm really starting to build a plan to multiply myself, and then I'm trying to encourage my leaders, my pastors, to multiply themselves. So, yeah. So I feel like I'm a lot more compassionate. I do feel like I'm a lot more present, but my priority is probably more equipping them in their own spiritual walk, and then equipping them to be equipping leaders, because we get a little too dependent on ourselves and other people in the work of the church. We really should be multiplying. So that was kind of another messy answer, but
no, that's a great answer. I would summarize the language that I like to use is to kind of summarize what you said is it's the if I get hit by a bus sure. Perspective. Yeah. That's what hey, if I get hit by a bus tomorrow, will the thing that we are trying to move forward grind to a screeching halt, or will it continue on? Hopefully it'll continue on with a little bit of sadness because I've been hit by a bus. But but apart from that, I think we get way self-important very, very easily. That's just one of those human things that we do. And it's like, no one can do what I do. And it's like, no, a lot of people can do what you do, and probably even better. And so how about you just have the humility to lead people that way? So,
again, it comes back to, this is what Jesus did, right? Jesus knew he was going to be physically leaving. And so he was in the equipping mode from the get-go. And so, but here we are, we're trying to preserve our position and our posture and all this.
Yeah.
So it's been really helpful. So I think for me, and then family too, it's priority and presence. I want to make sure that my people, my family know that they're a priority, and I want to be present. And one is a subset of the other. I mean, those two are like two sides of the same coin.
Yep.
Even since this whole thing went down over the last couple of years, like I'm a super busy guy. That's just part of my personality. It's definitely part of my position. But my kids will call me. All four of them will do this. They'll call, and the first question they ask is, "Are you busy?" And I hate that question because in their minds, this is what they know of Dad, that he's busy. And so now my new answer, because I want to be present to them and I want to communicate to them that they are a priority, but I also don't want to lie to them. I know my job is busy. I know it's like I'm flying to Miami tomorrow. I'll be there till Tuesday, and then I'm flying to Cincinnati, and then I'm flying back here. And it's a very, very full life. So now my answer to them is, I'm super busy, but I got time for you.
Yep.
And what that does is it tells the truth about the reality, but then it also communicates that you're a priority and I'm going to make time for you. And I'll get back to you. I'll text. And so your kids grow up not with this false sense of reality. I want them to grow up knowing that, it's a busy world, and my dad is carrying a lot of stuff, and he's trying to make a difference, but I'm still a priority in his life. And same thing for my wife, And so I think it's a really good rule of life that I have developed later than I would have liked. Looking back, I would have liked to say, man, why couldn't I have said that when I was 22 years old as a dad, But as they say, better late than never.
Well, yeah, I mean, cancer diagnosis will do that to you. So, it brings some clarity, which is great. Yeah. So my last question before we get to the really dynamic, fun part, end of the show here is what is next for Paul Baldwin that you can tell without letting, I don't know, maybe there's some major cat outlet you don't want to let out of the bag, but what's the trajectory of life for you and family and all of that at this point?
Yeah, you had sent that question ahead of me. I didn't really know how to answer that because we've just moved to Charleston, and we've always moved. Like, we moved to Indiana, we moved to Florida, always for a job. We didn't move up here for a job. We moved up here for family, and thank God we've been given the opportunity to work remotely. And COVID actually was a gift to us because it helped us realize that we could do a lot of these things remotely. So my heart is still very much for the local church. I'm a passionate champion for nonprofits. I think there's a lot of beautiful people doing a lot of beautiful things around the country. And so I will be doing a lot more work with this consulting group, the Elemental Group. And I love that. I'm working with a prison ministry out of Cincinnati, working with a couple of programs down in South Florida. And so I'll be doing a lot more consulting. But my personality is one that needs to be in the weeds of it. I need to roll my sleeves up and I need to be getting my hands dirty. So I'm trying to figure out how I can continue to do that, even beyond my role as the executive pastor. We don't really have a defined date yet for the executive pastor as I transition out of that role. But this book has opened up some opportunities as well too. So where I'm already working on a couple of more books and another devotion and another book on culture. And so I didn't think that would be a reality, but that is now a reality. And so we're pursuing that, and just want to continue to contribute to the kingdom advancement. I'm just asking God, just help me to continue to be useful in what I'm doing. And so I'm excited about that. And then we're up here in Charleston and just want to spend a lot of time around family down in Florida. We're empty nesters all by ourselves. Now we're empty nesters up here, and we're looking after. We've got our kids in the mix again, and so it seems like every night is something. We're loving it. It's absolutely amazing. Going to ice cream with our kids, hanging out with my grandbaby, and so I'm going to just try to be as busy as I can in the kingdom, and just be as busy as I can with our family. And
beautiful.
Then, get out of town once in a while with my wife, since we don't have little kids.
There we go.
Rub that into you guys again. But,
yeah. That's beautiful, man. Well, and we're, to all our listeners, I would say, and we, as we always do, a way to contact Paul, to follow Paul, to also link to the book over at paulbaldwin.com. See, he's super fancy. He's got his own website. We'll have all that in the show notes over at dudesanddadspodcast.com, so you can get in touch, just see what he's up to. I'm really excited for what is in the future for you, Paul. So that's all looking bright. I'm excited for you. So
all right, but before we let you go, though, we can't get you out of here without doing.
Now it's time for the Dudes and Dads Pop Quiz.
Oh, thank you.
Oh, yes.
I am excited about it. I know nothing. Just so your audience knows, they gave me a couple of questions to think about, but I know nothing about this next section.
And it's shrouded in mystery.
That's what we like.
Shrouded.
That's what we like. Yes. So if you've never joined us before, this is the time we just ask random questions to our guests that have nothing to do with the topic, but we just want to get to know you a little bit better. So without further ado, Paul, what is your favorite weekend trip?
We like to get out of town and go explore just kind of mystery towns. And so we just went down to Beaufort, South Carolina, discovered all sorts of cool things. So if we can get away for a night or two, that would be like the dream for us. And it's usually drive because we don't have like loads of money where we can just fly everywhere.
Contrary to popular belief.
That's right.
That's right. Paul, what is your the least favorite job that you've ever had?
Oh man, I'm one of those total nerds where I've loved every job I've had. Okay, so I used to work in a nuclear power plant.
What?
I'm sorry.
Wait, what?
You said a nuclear power plant? Well, that tracks.
So-
Okay.
I mentioned that my family runs the cement union, and so one of the big contracts they have is Diablo Canyon nuclear power plant in South California. And so I had a job of chipping concrete around rebar, the intake manifold. So this is this huge, like 7-foot tube that was under the sea level. It would bring water in to cool the reactor. Every 6 months, they would have to go in there and they would have to chip concrete and repair the rebar. And so I had the cool thing about the job, it was me and my cousins down there working. But the part that sucked about the job, it was 12 hours a day with a chipping hammer for like $9 an hour. And it was,
Wow.
I was like providing for my family and everything, which was cool. But man, it was nuts. It was a hard job.
Oh man.
All you fast food workers that are listening to this right now, get your perspective straight. You've just heard Paul. What do you have to complain about? That's what I'm saying.
All right, Paul. So if you could eliminate one food so that no one could eat it ever again, what food would you destroy?
Kale.
Yes.
Ooh, all right.
As
Wow.
Jim Gaffigan says, can we just lose the kale propaganda? It's not good for the human race.
Kale propaganda. Oh, those are wise words. Paul, what is one skill that you think everyone should have?
Oh, wow. One skill. Is this a skill, being interested? Like learning the art of being interested rather than working so hard to be interesting.
Golly, this is going to be a treasure trove right here. We're see, usually sometimes this quiz can go off the rails, but Paul is just keeping it going.
All right, Joel, you actually have one more question here than I do, so why don't you ask another one?
I'm going to ask another one. Paul, what old person things do you do?
What old person thinks? I've got pictures. I'm the guy who we'll start watching a movie like Lord of the Rings, which is like the worst idea at like 10. We'll watch a movie and just my kids just know that within 5 minutes, Dad is going to be asleep, and it's like ugly sleep too.
That's me right here.
Yeah,
right here.
It's okay. It's okay. Own it. Okay.
It'll be. I'll be like, it's terrible. So I do that, and then I also get up early. I've always gotten up early. Like I was just making fun of my parents because they're retired and they get up at like 5 o'clock. They set their alarm to get up at 5, which is just. But I've always been like, even when I was 13, 14 years old, I get up at 5, 5:30, 6 o'clock. And so, it's just always been something that I've done. But I'm just a natural early riser. And I love that. That's kind of what old people do. So I guess that's part of it, too. And I wear socks with my sandals sometimes, too.
Oh, bold move. Bold choice.
Yeah.
Bold choice.
Yeah.
All right. So my last question is, when did you get your first cell phone and what kind was it?
Yeah, it was 1996. It was a Nokia.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah.
It wasn't a flip. I got the flip phone, the next phone, and that was my favorite. But it was a Nokia. It was 1996.
It was probably the one that had like the worm game on it.
You have the worm game, Paul? Probably had the worm game. Here we go.
Yeah, so that was my first phone, and my son loves it, who's now 26 years old, and he's like, I'm like, I got it the year you were born.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Well, hey, my final question, Paul, is how long do you think you'd last in a zombie apocalypse?
Oh man. I mean, I think I'd go the distance. I mean, I think I'd go for a while.
Do you think do you feel like you're prepped enough, like between the resources that are available to you and kind of your just what you have in your network? Do you think you could make a run at it?
I think I can make a run at it for a couple of reasons. Number one, I mean, I grew up on some land in Southern California, and we used to, for fun, I was just telling the kids, we would like catch snakes, like king snakes, and we would like skin them and eat them, which is like the stupid thing to do but we would we would catch scorpions and we would do things like that. That's one reason I feel like I could eat anything. But the second reason is I'm pretty sure I could outrun my wife, and I could outrun. And so I figure.
Wow.
We're gonna cut that part out, right?
Yeah, well, that's Andy. I feel like I could outrun my wife. Wow. Okay. Everything was, again, like I said, we waited till the final question to let this thing go off the rails, and then here it was.
Yeah, we did it.
We did it. Paul, my friend, thank you so much for successfully completing and excelling at the Dudes and Dads Pop Quiz. You've just won the day. You've won the day, and
Awesome.
there's just nothing. There's no prize other than our admiration. So
awesome.
I hope that counts. But friends, as always, we want to just say thanks for listening. Thanks for hanging out with us for this episode. We will, as we said, over at dudesanddadspodcast.com with the show notes, give all the juicy details on how to get a hold of Paul, see what he's doing. Contact him or pick up a book. Would love for you to pick up Devout In Doubt. That would be a great help, and it's raising money for a good cause. So.
Absolutely. So if you have questions, comments, anything, send them to 574-213-8702. That's our voicemail number again, 574-213-8702. It's just a voicemail number, or you could always send an email to feedback@dudesanddadspodcast.com. And we'd love to hear from you guys over there. Joel, any final closing thoughts?
None from me. So grateful for each and every one of you. Can't wait to join you next time. And until then, we wish you grace
and peace.